Class, class, please pull your computers out. Today we will be going over the effects of World War II upon Russia. 2 years have passed. Sophia never imagined herself to be this far in her career ever. From substitute to full-paid teacher, she was living her dream. She always wanted to pursue teaching. There was something about being in charge that made her comfortable in her own skin. She never really got those opportunities other people got to be made the star of the show. Truly, deep down, she was just sad and lonely, lacking warmth and true attention. It seemed as though now, after everything, she finally had that true love, and it was teaching. Who can tell me why the Soviet Union tried to side with the US? Sophia asked. Was it for monetary gain post-war? A voice called from the class. Not exactly. Russia joined after Germany broke their non-aggression pact. Nice try, though, Sophia responded. Glee lingered in her eyes. The students loved her. She loved them. Sure, sometimes she could be a little bitter, but all in all, she was great at being a teacher. But being a substitute, that's where she crossed the line. She despised that job. It was sick and twisted to her. Why would she go in and teach a classroom full of ungrateful kids that would never listen to her? Suddenly the door sprang open, slamming into the wall, and two men walked over to Sophia. She felt an endless pit open in her stomach. Had they finally found out what she was doing? One of the men was a police officer, the other, Mr. South. Miss Gonzalez, come with us right now. No questions asked, Mr. South said. She was cut off as the police officer grabbed her arm by the arm and dragged her out. What did I do? She cried. Shut the hell up, Mr. South said. Mr. South had never spoken to her like that. So rudely and bitterly. Sophia was hurt beyond belief. Why was he against her now? Ever since the first time they hooked up, he had been nothing but sweet to her, bringing her gifts and treats on every Friday, and of course, the occasional frisky touching. Any time Sophia ever saw him, dirty thoughts would pollute her mind. Visions of his long, hard shaft, the way he grabbed her breasts, and the desperation in his eyes when they fucked. Now everything had changed between them. Sophia was practically thrown into Mr. South's office by the policeman. Listen up, young lady. You're going to tell us everything you know from the events of 2020, the officer said. What events? The shooting? What is it? Mr. South, what's happening? Sophia's eyes glistened of fear. Ma'am, you didn't think you would just get away with that, did you? Just because it's been a couple years doesn't mean people can't find out, the officer responded. You think I had something to do with the shooting in 2020? Why would I ever do that? Especially to a high school. I love this high school. Mr. South and I have worked so hard to clean this school up ever since that incident. I have fought day and night to forget about that. And you want to tell me I had something to do with that? Sophia quivered. Sophie, please, Mr. South said. No one ever said anything about you engaging in the shooting, the officer said. Oh, but we know you engaged in sexual intercourse with Mr. South the night before the shooting. Am I correct? What? No, never. He was my boss. I was only a part-time substitute at the time. We barely even talked, she exclaimed, baffled. Ma'am, you are aware it's illegal in the state of California to commit lewd acts in a classroom, he responded. But we never cut the shit. He already confessed. You're going away for a long time. I can't believe this is a reality, officer, Mr. South said. Well, thank you for confessing, Mr. South. Ever since that day, I always felt something was off. The abuse of power you held over me to have sex with you was disgusting. You pressured me and that was not okay, Sophia lied, just to save herself. That's not true. Mr. South has backed up claims that not only you forced him to have sex in the classroom, but you blackmailed him if he didn't, threatening to end his career and marital status unless he engaged in sexual actions with you, the officer said. I just couldn't go on with this lie anymore, Sophia. My wife found out, and she's furious at me. I had to tell her the truth. I had to come to this school and tell her the truth. And come to this school every day and see her face. So now, I had to tell her the real truth, so she didn't think I cheated. The truth is, you held me down, threatened my job, marriage, and life. You son of a bitch! It was fully consensual, and you know that, Sophia yelled. Ma'am, we have proof. There's no point in doing this, the officer said. Sophia wanted to ask what proof he had, but figured he'd show it either way. The officer pulled out a cassette tape and placed it on the TV on Mr. South's desk. It showed Sophia pushing Mr. South down in the empty classroom and having sex with him, conveniently cutting out the entire consensual conversation they had before. I know what that looks like, Sophia said, shaking. Oh, trust me, I'm aware. Are you still going to deny it? The officer said. I will no longer say anything until I have my lawyer, Sophia responded. Well, either way, bitch, you're under arrest, he said. What? You can't arrest me? That's not even enough evidence, you prick. Half the footage isn't even there. It's unusable. You completely missed the beginning of the tape where he did consent, Sophia said. Oh, so you want to play that way, huh? Don't think I won't be able to find any other way to convict your nasty ass. It'll become public and you'll be demoted. Better yet, fired from your job, then thrown into prison. The officer laughed. Please, no, you don't understand how much this job means to me. Please, don't do this, I swear. I swear I didn't do anything to Mr. South, Sophia said as she began to cry. Shut the fuck up, you dumb bitch. No one wants a predator teaching their children, the officer said. Sophia audibly yelped. A predator? She was no such thing. Larry, quit it. Just let her go. This has gone too far, Mr. South said. Larry? So you're that close to this officer, Mr. South, that you know his first name? What do you mean this has gone too far? Sophia said. Shut it, South. Don't you want to convict her? The officer hushed. No. Just stop. I can't do this. I can't send an innocent girl away just to save my own skin, he responded. I'm sorry, what? You're telling me all of this was truly so your wife didn't think you cheated? All of this? You're fucking sick and twisted, South, Sophia responded. Mr. South was silent. He knew what he did was wrong, but it was just to save himself from the embarrassment. Not to mention, he could lose his job if his wife told the school he had an affair with a teacher. And I'm sorry, but who the fuck are you then? A fake cop? Sophia screamed. No, Sophia, please, just... I told him to stop, so can't you just forgive me? Mr. South said. No way. You dug yourself into way too deep of a hole. And now you're gonna fucking pay, Sophia said. Oh, don't worry, sweetie. I've faked a lot of convictions, and I can easily fake yours, the officer said. Larry, I told you to stop, Mr. South said. You think I'm just gonna stop now? This girl could report me and have me lose my job as a cop for doing this right now. It's either she goes to jail or I lose my job. And trust me, when I say I'm never gonna lose this job, the officer responded. I have a class to teach. I don't have time for this, Sophia said as she walked out of the door, slamming it as hard as she could. The sun began to set. Sophia was getting ready for something. She knew what she was going to do tonight, but she didn't know if she had the strength to do it. She made a full-fledged plan, an evil plan. Suddenly, a knock was heard from the front door of her apartment. She slowly stood up, grabbing something from the kitchen and walking towards the door. Right there was Mr. South, standing there in a suit. He must have just gotten off of work. You know, I'm glad you called me over here. I agree. Things were getting a little out of control earlier today, Mr. South said as he walked in. Her apartment was show-stopping to him. On the outside, it looked ugly, but on the inside, it was spectacular. A chandelier hanging from the foyer and white marble flooring graced him with their presence. "Geez, how do you have the money for all of this?" he asked. "Oh, you know, I just take up false identities and trick men into marrying me so I can steal their fortunes," Sophia said nonchalantly. Mr. South laughed. "Good one, Sophia." Sophia stayed silent. "You know, ever since that first time you fucked me, I had the largest crush on you. But then you fucked me again. This time way too much. You really thought it was a good idea to frame me, Mr. South?" Sophia said. "Well, no, you nothing. You have no excuse for what you've done. Trying to hurt me, all because you're too ashamed to admit you liked my pussy." Sophia laughed. "I'm leaving. I thought you called me here to accept my apology. But if you're gonna be like that, then never mind, Sophia. No, wait, just... What's the officer's ID number?" "I do accept your apology, and next I want to go to him and accept his. It's just a little hard, so I apologize if I come off like that," Sophia said. Mr. South relaxed a little bit at the sound of this. "Well, I'm happy to hear you won't take this personal. Can I text you his info if you need?" "That'd be great, thanks." Mr. South pulled out his phone and sent the text. "Mr. South, tell me this. How could you do that, though? I genuinely want to know. How could you?" Sophia said calmly. "What did I just say?" Mr. South bursted out yelling. "Shut the fuck up already, Sophia. I'm sorry. Okay? No. You don't just get to do that shit and get away with sorry. My job is still at risk because of that crazy police officer," Sophia said. "Well, I'm sure he'll drop it if you just show him a true apology," Mr. South said. Oh, so I have to apologize now? Me? Fuck you, you piece of shit," Sophia yelled as she slapped his chest. He grabbed her wrists, fighting her off of him. She screamed and yelled continuously, hitting him. All this pent-up anger was releasing. She couldn't help herself. She threw herself into him and began making out with him. Every kiss growing more and more aggressive. Mr. South didn't dare to pull away either. He knew he needed this. They were both so deprived from one another for so long. It was becoming unbearable. And all this pent-up anger, they knew there was a semblance of romance lingering inside. Or at least Mr. South did. The anger in Mr. South turned to heat. He whipped his cock out and threw her on a desk by the door, both breathing heavily and both drooling at the mouth. Sophia grabbed her underwear and ripped it off completely as Mr. South entered her, thrusting back and forth, the fucking so intensely beautiful it felt euphoric. Sophia begged for more, and finally, they both simultaneously came at the same time. Fuck, Sophia. We can't keep doing this. But I feel so good. Huh? She laughed. You know, your biggest mistake was ever trusting me. I'm no teacher, and never was. It's much, much deeper than you realize, South. What? Mr. South said. Did I mention that I kill them too? Sophia said. The men that I marry and steal their money from. Yeah, of course, Mr. South laughed. But I'll make an exception with you, since we aren't married, she said as she lunged for the knife she grabbed earlier in the kitchen and threw it into his chest. She stabbed him repeatedly as blood went everywhere. He tried to fight it, but as always, Sophia always wins. She watched the life slip from his sad, iridescent eyes as he bled out, laying there in shock. Too bad you had to get in the way of my plans.